Hey guys, it's Jenny Silver, and today I want to talk to those of you that are wondering what is the future of the federal provisions for unemployment, the $300 boost, PUA and PEUC, and an update on these federal provisions for unemployment. Following the release of an unfavorable jobs report for the month of April released by the Department of Labor, many Republican-led states have stated that they will be opting out of federal provisions for unemployment earlier than the September 6th end date. The April jobs report that was released by the Department of Labor showed that 226 jobs were added to the economy during the month of April. This is a sharp decline from the 770,000 jobs that we saw added in the month of March, and far below the projected 995,000 jobs that economists had forecast would be added to the economy. Additionally, we remain at 8.2 million jobs below pre-pandemic level. The release of this jobs report led to the state of Montana stating that it would be withdrawing from federal provisions for unemployment early, which now has triggered many other Republican-led states to follow suit. The following states will no longer participate in enhanced federal unemployment benefits: Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, and Wyoming. Additionally, many states are choosing to change their work search requirements in order for claimants to continue to receive benefits. Additionally, in the Senate, we saw proposed a new bill to end the $300 FPUC boost at the end of May. This is known as the Get Americans Back to Work Act. It is backed by 10 Republican senators, and it would require 10 Democratic senators to get on board with it in order for it to pass through the Senate. Well, you guys, many of you are wondering, what does the CARES Act language state? And can states remove the ability from claimants to collect PUA, PEUC, and the $300 boost early? Well, there are some legal experts that have been dissecting the CARES Act text and have confronted the Department of Labor about their responsibility to still deliver certain federal level pandemic-related unemployment benefits, even if states remove them. NELP is the National Employment Law Project, which is a worker advocacy legal center in Washington. On Wednesday, NELP wrote a letter to the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh. So what specifically does the CARES Act language state about whether or not states can opt in or opt out of paying out PEUC, FPUC, and PUA? Now, the CARES agreements themselves appear to allow states to terminate all CARES programs early. However, the CARES Act itself does not support the same state discretion for the PUA program. The way that it is written in the CARES Act, MEUC, PEUC, FPUC, the $300 boost, the extension, and the mixed earners boost can all be opted out of, but PUA cannot necessarily be opted out of because the language is written differently. Now, what about the $300 FPUC boost? What does the CARES Act language state about that? Federal state agreements, any state which desires to do so, may enter into and participate in an agreement under this section with the Secretary of Labor. Any state which is a party to an agreement under this section, upon providing 30 days written notice to the Secretary, may terminate such agreement. There's a similar opt-in and opt-out provision for PEUC in the CARES Act. However, the PUA section of the CARES Act does not contain similar language. The state discretion agreement language for FPUC and PEUC is replaced in PUA with something different. Now, in the CARES Act text, PUA specifically is put upon the Department of Labor as its responsibility to make sure that an eligible claimant receives those benefits. Now, the CARES Act states that the Secretary shall provide to any covered individual unemployment benefit assistance while such individual is unemployed, partially unemployed, or unable to work for the weeks of such unemployment with respect to which the individual is not entitled to any other employment compensation. It then goes on to state the Secretary of Labor must provide PUA benefits to an individual who is determined to be eligible. In addition, the CARES Act language makes it clear that any PUA payment to a covered individual must also include an additional $300. NELP states that therefore the Department of Labor's duty to provide PUA to covered individuals means PUA recipients should, as part of their PUA payment, receive the PUA weekly benefit amount plus the additional $300. They state here that this would apply even if a state terminated its agreement to pay FPUC. Recently, several states announced that they are terminating their agreement early, and this leaves the Department of Labor in a quandary because they are obligated to provide assistance. So, because the CARES Act places the burden of providing PUA assistance on the Department of Labor Secretary, even if the states opt not to provide PUA, the Department of Labor is still not relieved of that burden. NELP then goes on to provide two suggested options in the case that a state wants to opt out of paying out PUA. Option number one is requiring states to continue paying PUA. The Department of Labor could require canceling states to continue paying PUA. Under this option, Department of Labor could allow a state to terminate their FPUC, PEUC, and MEUC agreements, but require it to continue to administer PUA benefits. So, because there's no provision in PUA allowing states to opt in and out, it would be in the Department of Labor's discretion not to allow states to opt out of PUA. The second option includes entering into an agreement with other states to administer PUA. Another option for the Department of Labor to meet their obligation under the CARES Act to provide PUA to every covered individual would be to enter into an agreement with another state to administer PUA for any covered individual whose state agency has stopped administering PUA benefits. Now, there's nothing in the CARES Act that prohibits this, opting into an agreement with another state to pay it out to eligible claimants, and there is a precedent of other states doing this when they needed to pay out DUA claimants in the case of other natural disasters. Okay, guys, so I hope that was helpful in giving you an understanding of exactly what the CARES Act language states in terms of the federal provisions for unemployment. Please click like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. If a state is able to opt in or out of certain... What is happening? This is a sharp decrease from the 770,000 jobs that were added during the March of month. The March of month. What March is it? It's month.